Good evening. Oh, good evening, everyone. This is a test.
Yeah, this one's not working. Oh, yes, it is. Hello?
Hello. Do what? Oh,
Hello?
hello. Okay. Testing complete. Okay, good evening, everyone. Is everyone ready to get started?
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Well, my name is Erica Robinson, and I am the chair of the African American Advisory Board for LADA Gascon. And this evening, we wanted to engage in a discussion with our community members. And so we will be introducing our special guests and our LADA advisory board members. If you're present, if you can just give a wave, we want to acknowledge you. Okay, Miss Bernita's here, as well as Dr. Mershawn. But the mission and vision of the LADA African LADA African American Advisory Board is to advise LADA Gascon and his office regarding the policies, priority issues, and best practices related to our members meet regularly, outreach, and work to improve diversity and inclusion within the office. And alongside me today, who is going to be moderating this discussion, is Dr. Ramona Mershon. And she is a native Angelino with over 2 decades of experience in public service in Los Angeles County. Dr. Mershon currently serves as the executive director of Trauma Informed LA and is the project director with the Los Angeles County. Is passionate about assisting vulnerable and marginalized communities. She embodies the value of equity, culturally responsiveness, and trauma-informed care, and believes they belong at the center of all community engagement. Ramona has lectured and trained on various topics in the area of child welfare, diversity, racial equity, leadership, and trauma. If you guys can just give a hand for Dr. Mershawn.
Thank this mic. No? Okay, here we go. All right. So thank you so much for welcoming the DA's African American Advisory Board. I'm really excited to be here tonight and representing our board. I have the pleasure of introducing Pastor Orlando Hadnot. He is a pillar in the community for many, many years. Even though he's a transplant from Texas, I'll forgive him because my family's from Louisiana. But I am also a native Angelino. After serving in the Navy, he received his master's degree in organizational management from the University of Phoenix. He has over 26 years of business leadership training as well as a spiritual development. Pastor Hadnot has served in various capacities at the Holy Tabernacle of God Missionary Baptist Church before being named pastor. Pastor O, as many call him, is a willing servant, eager to share his life experiences and to help others navigate through life's challenges. His heart is towards God's people to reach, teach, and disciple and love. And I can truly say I personally have seen this testament as he serves. He serves his community by leading the Child Welfare Cultural Broker Program and serving as a steering committee member on the LA County Community Eliminating Racial Disparity and Community Advisory Board. So thank you, Pastor, for allowing us to share this space with you this evening, and please welcome Pastor Orlando Hadnot.
Good evening, everyone. We are very excited to have all of you here with us tonight. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's African American Advisory Board. We look forward to this discussion tonight. And we're excited that you're sharing this discussion, that you've come out to the community to help with us and collaborating with us, because I think it truly shows that you do care about South Los Angeles and us here at Little Old Florence, 2312 West Florence Avenue. We're excited because we know that we can actually make a difference because of tonight's discussion. We can make a difference because of people coming out and sharing information about being able to bring people together, trying to make sure that people are not doing things that we shouldn't be doing in the streets here in Los Angeles. But we really are excited to have you all here tonight. And our church family looks forward to hosting you again and having future opportunities to bring you all out tonight. So again, thank you and welcome.
All kind of issues tonight. All right. I don't have to hold it? Oh, there we go. Well, there's the problem. Well, we wouldn't be an advisory board if we didn't have anyone to advise. So it is my pleasure to tell you a little bit about our current district attorney, George Gascon. DA Gascon has spent his life working to ensure our justice system works for everyone. George is a Cuban immigrant and an Army veteran. See, we have that military thing in common. I was also in the Air Force. He was raised in Southeast Los Angeles, so he is also a native Angelino. DA Gascon served over 20 years with the LAPD, then later as Chief of Police in Mesa, Arizona, and Chief of Police in San Francisco. He later served as District Attorney of San Francisco and returned home to LA to be with his family and was recruited by community advocates to enter the race for District Attorney. DA Gascon was elected as the LA County District Attorney in 2020 on a platform centered on bringing criminal justice reform to the largest DA's office in the country. One of his first acts as the district attorney was to convene these community advisory boards to ensure the communities most impacted by the criminal justice system always had a voice at the table and a direct line advocate for the issues that matter to us the most. We are proud to be the historic first members of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office first African American Advisory Board. Welcome, DA Gascon.
Thank you, and thank you all, and Pastor Hadnot, thank you for opening this house of God for all of us. And I want to thank our African American Advisory Board, wonderful, wonderful members of our board that not only have put this event together today, but have done so much work in order for us to connect with the community, in order for us to make a difference in so many ways. You know, today we're going to be talking about diversion, and you're going to hear from members of our office, you're going to hear from attorneys, you're going to hear from our victim services, you're going to hear also from community-based organizations that are doing the work with us. And I see some of our friends that are here as well, you know, to join us. But I kind of want to give you a little bit of a background of, you know, why do we do diversion, and walk you through sort of the impetus behind the work that we're doing. I think it's unquestionable that when it comes to communities of color, and especially African Americans and Latino communities that are poor, we understand that the criminal system, the criminal legal system, hasn't always been fair to them. We know that often people that are equally situated, if they happen to be poor and they happen to be black or brown, the consequences may be much more harshful than if they're not. And some of the things that we're trying to do in our office is trying to equalize that process. We also recognize that when we send people to prison, we often do not provide any rehabilitative tools in order for them to get back into our community. And we know that people that are traumatized in the process, they come back and they not only harm themselves, but they harm others. We also know that often our victims have all kinds of untreated trauma. And then they go out and not only do they harm themselves, but they harm others. And that's why we want to talk both about the diversion, but we also want to talk about victim services. Our diversion programs are basically designed to provide people an opportunity, an off-ramp, if you will, from the criminal justice system and incarceration into a process where they're given an opportunity to deal with their mental health issues, they deal with substance dependence, they're dealing with many other trauma-driven issues that got them to where they are in the first place. And we know that when we can divert people successfully, they become a successful member of our community. And they're not only able to help themselves, but they're able to help others. So the work that we are trying to do with you all in this area is work that we're passionate about because we know that it makes a difference. We know that it's good for public safety, and we know that it's good for our community. So I want to thank you all for being here this evening. Once again, thank you, Pastor, for allowing us to be in this house of God. And all of you that are here today, look forward to this process today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DA Gascon. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Gilbert Wright. Gilbert is the head deputy district attorney of the LADA's Mental Health Division. He previously worked as a special assistant for the Bureau of Prosecution Support Operations and assistant head deputy at the Airport Branch Office. Gilbert joined the LA District Attorney's Office in 1989 and has worked in various divisions, including central trials, justice system integrity, and special investigations. Gilbert is the president and co-founder of the Black Prosecutors Association in Los Angeles. He graduated with his JD from Southwestern Law School. Welcome, Gilbert.
Thank you very much. So this mic works? Okay, good. Let me just sit it down. Have to have a little water. All right, I was told that I have 2 hours. Is that right? Can you give me 30? No? Okay, good. All right. So we'll just dive right into this. I've been a DA for 34 years. I born and raised here in Los Angeles. And this was basically my first job out of law school, and I thought I was going to leave soon, but I stayed because the mission that we were doing, I thought was powerful. And it's what I tell young DAs, if I can just digress a bit, and young lawyers, the best community service you could do when you're coming out of law school is either go to the public defender's office or go to the DA's office, because that's where you are working very close with the folks that need the best help that you can provide. So without further ado, let me get into our discussion today, and it's about our mental health division, and it's about mental health diversion. Let's just stay with that slide for a second. Back in 2013, 2015, the justice partners got together, and when I say justice partners, I mean the public defender, judges, mental health professionals, DMH, probation officers, police officers, DA, all got together to try to determine how we can address the mental health crisis that's going on in our city. Around that time, I don't know if you remember, the county jail had about 18,000 people in jail. It was determined that approximately 1/3 of those individuals were living with a mental illness. So it was decided how is the best way we can get those individuals out of the criminal justice system and get them into a mental health facility or mental health treatment that can specifically address, that could specifically address their issues. And some of the discussions that came out of that program are programs that are actually happening right now, like the Office of Diversion and Reentry. I'll talk about that a little bit. LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And then it was decided back in 2018 that since the Penal Code Section 1001.36, the pretrial mental health diversion motion came out, it was decided that we should have a mental health division to specifically address this. So next slide. We have the mental health diversion mission statement, and it's to help remove as many people living with a mental illness out of the criminal justice system and into a community-based system of care while ensuring public safety is not jeopardized. And I assure you that last part is the operative phrase. When I first came aboard, I thought I was going to be handling a lot of low-level crimes like trespassing, robberies, low-level robberies. When I say low-level, if you go into CVS and you take something, it's just a theft at that point. But if there's a struggle with the loss prevention officer, it then becomes a robbery. Those are the type of cases we traditionally try to divert as much as we can, unless folks continue to do that, and then we have to try something else. But that's not what I've been seeing. Most of the cases I get are cases where they are extremely violent. And it's not to say that those folks are not living with a mental illness. It is to say that we have to be very careful about having someone leave jail and go into an unlocked community-based system of care. An unlocked community-based system of care, which is probably not too far away from here and not too far away from most of our folks in the Latino community. So we just have to be careful about that. It's not to say that folks are not living with a mental illness, but without getting into the types of crimes, because there's HIPAA issues, and I don't want to identify cases, but we do get a lot of stabbings. We get a lot of people being beaten up to a pulp. We get a lot of serious cases, so we just have to be careful about that. When our division was formed, we subsumed a couple of other units. The next slide. We subsumed what we call our alternate sentencing courts. I'll talk about that. Our psychiatric section. When I say you may know it as Department 95, I do this talk for lawyers as well, so they know what I'm talking about when I say Department 95. But that's the mental health court now in Hollywood. So we supervise that division, and then we also supervise the Office of Diversion and Reentry courts, meaning we have people in those courts that staff those courts. And these are the people that help me run the organization. Very capable folks, very knowledgeable folks. Next slide. But let's begin with talking about the alternative sentencing court. That's a court now that used to be in East LA. It's now back downtown, and they have a lot of courts where individuals can get into, but you have to plead to get into these courts. This is just a thumbnail sketch of these courts. The drug court doesn't have as many people in those courts now as it used to, because with the onset of Proposition 47, which made possession of narcotics a misdemeanor, a lot of folks just don't want to spend the time to stay in there for 9 months. It was a good program, but some of those courts are still around, but it's not, they're not really being utilized as they used to be. The Sentence Offender Drug Court is basically geared towards substance abuse. Those folks who are having serious substance abuse problems. There is some mental health component as well. But you can get into these courts. Again, you have to plead to get into that court. The Co-Occurring Disorders Court is a court where you have substance abuse issues as well as mental health issues. Second Chance Women's Reentry Court, it's just for women, and it's for women for lack of a better word, women who have been abused. They get different type of treatment in this program to specifically address their issues as well. The Veterans Court, that's self-explanatory. And the Community Collaborative Court is like the catch-all. If you can't qualify for any of these other courts, you'll probably get into the Community Collaborative Court. As you can see on these, on the handout or on the PowerPoint, if you do well in it, the case will, the defense will ask for a reduction to a misdemeanor or an expungement, and that usually happens, and the prosecutor doesn't object. So it's all about gearing towards helping them out, helping them get the help that they need, and not to have them have it on their record. Let's go to the next slide. Our psychiatric section is again, it's the division that handles everything that's over in our mental health court. The way you get into the mental health court is if the defense believes that their client is incompetent to stand trial, or the court believes the person is incompetent to stand trial, the proceedings stop at that point. So you could be at the prelim, or you could be orbiting for trial, but the proceedings stop, and that individual is then taken over to the mental health court. It would take about 2 weeks to get over there, and then their hearing is scheduled. If it is determined that they're, after a psychiatrist or a psychologist evaluates them, if it's determined that they are incompetent to stand trial, then they go off to the state hospital. There is an aspect of ODR over there, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But generally, they go off to the state hospital and get their competency restored. If their competency is not restored, and now it's only 2 years, then depending on the case, it could get dismissed, and that individual probably will continue to get treatment or get into a conservatorship. But depending on the case might get dismissed, but sometimes we have murder cases over there, so we very rarely dismiss those cases. If their competency is restored, they come back to the mental health court, the judge makes the final decision about that, and then they're taken back to the court where they came from, and criminal proceedings would resume right from where it left off. So if they're at the preliminary hearing stage and they hadn't done the preliminary hearing, then they got to do the preliminary hearing. If it's past that, and like I said, they're waiting for trial, then they will probably either have a trial or there'll be some kind of disposition that they might agree to. Move to the next slide. That's the Office of Diversion and Reentry. So I'll be using ODR, or I'll be saying Office of Diversion and Reentry. I'll be using that interchangeably. The Office of Diversion and Reentry was one of those organizations that came out of that Justice Partners meeting that I told you about. It is situated within the Department of Health Services. They were established, I think, in 2017 when the Justice Partners and the mental health clinicians and the judges and the probation officers agreed to establish it. They also decided to establish a court, a pilot court downtown. And it's still there, but with some added, with some additions that we'll talk about. So we call it the ODR court. If you can go to the next slide. It was established by the County Board of Supervisors. As I said, it's situated within the Department of Health Services, and this is their mission: diminish recidivism and establish treatment programs and housing that accomplish the above goals. There is a process to get into the ODR court. I'm going to explain it sort of twofold. You can go to the next slide. These are the requirements. You went too far. Oh. Okay, well, my alpha friend is trying to mess with a kappa, but that's okay. That's all right. We'll leave it at that. So those are the requirements to get into the ODR court. You have to be in custody, homeless, must suffer a serious mental illness, and enter a negotiated plea. Homelessness is described very broadly, and it's ODR. The ODR clinicians describe that, meaning you could be, if you're couch surfing or if you're just visiting someone's home but you don't have any place to stay, you could be considered homeless. Again, they make this assessment while you're in jail. And like, as I said, you must suffer a serious mental illness and you have to enter a negotiated plea. So you had to plea to get into that court, and you would be placed on probation. The process is we have to do what we call strike priors. Now, serious felonies are considered strikes. Those are your robberies. Those are your first-degree burglaries. Those are serious assaults. Those are strikes. You cannot have a prior conviction of a strike. So if the prosecutor and the defense and the judge agrees that this person should go into ODR, those prior convictions have to be stricken. However, you can plead to a serious felony, if it's a robbery or a strike, and stay in ODR. A while ago, the way you got into it is that the defense attorneys would send the defense attorneys would send a note to the ODR portal, that's the best way I could say it, and tell the ODR professionals that we would like this person considered. That has changed now, that's why the X is up there. The new way of doing it now is that ODR is picking the people that they're going to handle. And ODR is going to only take the most serious ill. That's what I mean when I say the most acute. ODR takes the most serious ill individuals, they evaluate them, they think this person might be good for their services, they go to the defense attorney, they tell the defense attorney, we like this person to come in, what say you? If the defense attorney agrees, then they will submit that person's name for evaluation. If they don't agree, the defense attorney can veto that, and then they will move on to the next person. And so these are all the other aspects of what you can get with the ODR court. But if you remember nothing from what I'm saying today, remember this. For even if there's cases where I would disagree, cases going into ODR, the ODR professionals, the ODR clinicians are a bunch of dedicated individuals that are all about trying to make sure the individuals that are in ODR get the treatment they need. And ODR understands the way you treat mental illness, you got to change the paradigm. And the way you change the paradigm is you understand that even though someone's probation is up, doesn't mean their mental illness goes away. And so they can stay in ODR for the rest of their life if they want. And some do, some take them up, but it's voluntary, you can't force them to stay. But that's how you change how we handle the mental health crisis that's going on. Just because your probation is up, just because your case is over, doesn't mean that you're not still living with a mental illness. Once your case is up, if you're not continuing with your treatment, you're going to start to decompensate. And man, we've seen folks that decompensate. And if they decompensate, especially if they're violent, they're probably going to act out violently again. So the way we need to get to them is to have them either stay in treatment, like an ODR, like a DMH, for as long as they need to. And some of these individuals need lifelong help. And that's, if there's anything that you can help to contact your board of supervisors, because I know the DA is probably at as well, tell them we need more facilities like that where people can stay for, if not the rest of their life, for a very long time. So the ODR hub courts, it was decided back in probably 2022, 2021, that the pilot project was working so well. Now we need to branch it out and start it county-wide. And so now we have an ODR hub court that's at Airport. We had an ODR hub court that was in Van Nuys. It's now moved back downtown, but it services folks from Van Nuys and San Fernando. And the original court is also a hub court. So the Airport takes everything from South Bay. Van Nuys takes everything from Van Nuys and San Fernando. Downtown takes Pomona, Norwalk, Pasadena, and those cases. Antelope Valley has its own program. I don't know why they don't really address Antelope Valley any better, but Antelope Valley has developed their own program. But the way to get into the ODR hub courts is the same way that I just told you. So now moving on to the next slide, and we're almost done. We want to talk about our mental health diversion program. Our pretrial mental health diversion program, our pretrial mental health diversion statute, again, is codified in PC 1001.36. It was enacted in 2018, in June of 2018, and then amended in November of 2018. What I have up here is what it is designed to promote, but notice the second bullet point. It was decided in the beginning that the mental disorder had to play a significant role in the commission of the charged offense. And then in 2020, and the judge would make the decision as to whether or not there's been a showing that the illness was a significant contributor to the offense. But in 2023, they amended it, and now the judge has to presume that there is that the mental illness, that the diagnosis significantly contributed to the offense, unless the prosecutor can prove by clear and convincing evidence that it's not. And so as long as there's a mental health disorder, the court has to presume that that the mental health disorder significantly contributed to the offense. I understand why they amended it, and we can talk about it, but there's some issues that it presents for prosecutors, as you can imagine. But the mental health diversion statute as it is designed to do a very important thing, also get individuals who are living with a mental illness into a mental health facility designed to address their specific needs. And so these are all the requirements. The second to the last one, the court is satisfied that the defendant will not pose an unreasonable risk of danger. That's a biggie. Because as I told you, not only just for ODR, in most of my mental health diversion motions, they're very serious cases. That's the best way I can tell you. They are really, really serious cases. And you have to really be clear about whether or not you think this person is going to be successful in an unlocked community-based system of care. Most of the mental health experts will always say that we think this person should, and they're the mental health expert. I understand that. But sometimes when you look at the prior history and the facts of what happened in the particular case, it's very difficult to agree with that. But that's not to say, again, that people are not living with a mental illness. That's not to say that folks who are acting out violently are not living with a mental illness. You've heard the stories of people who just walk up to folks and stab folks on the streets. To me, it's clear they're living with a mental illness. It's clear. But where does that person go at that point? That's the issue. Do they go to an unlocked, or did they go to a locked? Right now, we really only have unlocked or jail. We have one locked facility that I know of, and it's always full. And again, if you're ever thinking about talking to your elected officials, we need a menu of mental health facilities, some that will take locked folks, some that are secure, and some that are unlocked right now. But it can't be one size that fits all. That's the thing I want to get through to you. The next slide is the last element. If the 6 requirements are met, then the court must determine if the recommended community-based system of care will meet the specialized treatment of the defendant. And the defense has to bring a mental health, must have a treatment program, in my opinion. Some defense attorneys disagree with me on that. But I think the code section is clear. Now, remember when I said the statute was created in June of 2018. In June of 2018, you could have gotten mental health, you could have asked for mental health diversion for any case. But in November of 2018, they amended it and they had these exclusions: murder or voluntary manslaughter, any offense, rape, etc. So if you're charged with any of these offenses, you can't ask for mental health diversion according to the statute. And then the next slide just tells you that the court, it just basically tells you the court has wide discretion in how these hearings go. The court can listen to any type of evidence that they think is reliable. It could be hearsay, it could be anything that they think is reliable. Diversion lasts for 2 years. So after that 2 years, if the person did well, they graduate, then the case goes away. It's dismissed. It's like it never happened. And that's different from the alternate sentencing courts we're talking about, in a way. But this is like the arrest never happened. We can't ask for restitution. If the restitution isn't paid within those 2 years, then the victim is going to have to go to court and get a civil arrangement. And remember when I told you that ODR, you had to plead to get into that? Once the Penal Code Section 1001.36 came out, ODR now has a mental health diversion component as well. But you can only get into ODR on a pretrial mental health diversion request if you're suffering from bipolar disorder, schizophrenia disorder, or schizoaffective disorder. If it's anything else, you cannot get into ODR. You have to plead to get into ODR. And that was a decision that was made when they got their grant to do that. The next slide is real quick. These are just factors that we look at. It was decided that in our office, since our office is so vast, we stretch from Long Beach to Antelope Valley, Compton to Norwalk, that if we want to be consistent, there should be one division making this decision about whether or not people get mental health diversion. And so all those diversion motions where that are like in Long Beach or in Compton, if the head deputy out there agrees with diversion, then that person gets diversion. It doesn't get to me. If they disagree with it, then it comes to our unit and we make the final decision. We do that because we're trying to make sure we remain as consistent as possible. You don't want someone in a comparable situation who has a comparable crime, comparable background in Compton, getting a different outcome in, I got to get out of here, huh? Getting a different outcome in Lancaster. So that's why we have it here. But I must tell you, these motions are coming in at fast and furious. I'm probably doing like 5 or 6 a day. And they're fairly intensive. You got to read the motions. You've got to read the mental health expert reports. So it takes some time. And lastly, there are other programs that we have. I think DA Gascon helped start the pre-filing diversion program with the LAPD at 77th. He helped create it, but they're running it, and they decide whether or not, according to whether or not people have committed certain crimes, whether those individuals can get diversion. And if they get diversion and they do well, we never see those cases, so they never get charged. We also have a pre-filing diversion program, which diverts misdemeanors and low-level nonviolent cases as well. We have a rapid diversion program that was started by the public defenders. I got to give them their props. The rapid diversion program is done just the way our pretrial mental health diversion statute is done. It's pursuant to PC 1001.36, except that we try to reach those folks at the earliest stage possible. like at arraignment, at maybe their first court appearance. So they don't stay in the criminal justice system. They don't stay in the jail for too long of a time. And the last is our lead. That's done by the police officers. It's the law enforcement assisted diversion program, and they basically contact people out in the streets, see if those individuals should get diversion or should get into a mental health facility. If they do well, then again, we never see them, and they stay, and hopefully they continue on with their mental health progress. That's essentially it. You can go to the next slide. Oh, I've left you, man. We're done. I want to thank you. I know it was sort of long. If you have any questions, you can ask me later on. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Ashley, does anybody have one or two questions they want to ask Gilbert now?
So when you were talking about veterans court, for example, or any of the ones that are like hyper-specific to the identity of an individual, how do people get identified to end up, who along the way identifies them?
Usually it's the defense attorney, but often it's also the prosecutor as well, and the judge, because at some point in time, someone will say, this person was a veteran, and everybody knows, hey, was this person honorably discharged? Do they have this certain type of issue? Then let's see if they qualify to get into Veterans Court. Same for co-occurring. If we think someone has a substance abuse issue and a mental health issue, then, and a mental health issue, then we start recommending those people for co-occurring disorders. I hope I answered that question. Anybody else?
About the housing.
Yes.
You said that you need more places.
Yes.
What would qualify, how would a person that may have some property that has several rooms be able to qualify for that?
You know, I think you asked me that before, and I didn't have a good answer for you then. And I don't think I have a good answer for you now because I don't work specifically in that field. If we have any ODR reps or DMH reps, maybe they can talk to you about that. But I just don't have enough information for you. But I know that there is a way you can let folks know, and then you can qualify, and there's state requirements that you'll have to follow as well. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes.
You mentioned the Antelope Valley, which I appreciate that. I'm from the Antelope Valley. And you indicated that they have their kind of own system.
Yes.
We got some major issues up here with respect to dealing with law enforcement and dealing with people that have mental issues. Is there a reason why it's somewhat different or distinct from what from the way it works in LA County with the way it works there? I mean, I see it affected a little bit, but I'm sure that there could be more
The best I can tell you is when ODR was created, I just don't know if they were, I think at the time Antelope Valley had their own program, and ODR was just getting started, and maybe they just didn't, maybe they felt that they could not get up there. But from what I understand, there's a lot of programs up there, and the judges also know about the programs, and they are constantly trying to get folks into the programs. Now, your experience may be different. That's what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong. Okay.
Find somebody who has a mental.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Oh, the question was the law enforcement assisted diversion lead? Is it also out in Antelope Valley? And I don't think it's made it out there. It started in the Compton Long Beach corridor, and then it went to Hollywood, and then it's in East LA. I'm not sure it's branched out too much further than that.
And is that something we should take up with
Yes.
Chief Luna?
I would, yes,
Okay.
to see when it can start.
Okay.
Everyone has told me that they believe that that's a good program, and it's, number one, it's a way to improve community relations between law enforcement and the community, and people are getting some good treatment programs out of that.
We need that. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay. Yes, sir. Good evening.
CEO of MP Programs and Solutions. Thank you. And so I heard you talking about, when I walked in, forgive me for being late, the mental health diversion program
Yes.
and the different areas where it's currently being piloted and or running.
Yeah, not quite. It's not a pilot program anymore. It's
official.
everywhere, yeah.
Okay. And so you said in the 77th district or precinct, it's currently in the hands.
Sorry, I'm talking about that's something different. The pre-filing diversion program is a pilot program out of LAPD 77th Division. And so, yes, that is a pilot program. That's different from LEAD, that's different from pretrial mental health diversion. It's a different program, but with the same goals, trying to get people some treatment before there's a charge leveled against them and before they come into the criminal justice system.
Okay, I received that. It caught my attention. So my question to you is, by it being in their hands to determine when it should and should not be deployed, is there like a outside body that monitors or, that they report to determine whether or not it's being utilized effectively?
That I don't know. I would think the police commission is probably the only outside body that would probably monitor it. But they had to do that with community input. So let me scratch that. There might be, I just don't have enough information for you, I'm sorry.
That's a problem right there by itself, the fact that you don't have enough information,
Right.
because we should know.
Well,
So I just wanted to ask you. 'cause it caught
I
my
can't know
attention.
everything, brother, I'm sorry.
I understand.
But,
Just
I
something for us all
try.
to think about, right?
Okay, right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is that it?
Thank you, Gilbert.
Thank you. Sorry.
Did I hear you say you were a Kappa?
I'm a Kappa.
Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, okay. Well, we want to thank Mr. Wright, for his time and his amazing presentation and information. We will take your question back and try to get an answer for you, so I'm sure the representatives here will write that down. There may be, the Police Oversight Commission or some other body that can get an answer for you. So we want to make sure that we take your information back, and we will get back to you, okay? So make sure we get his information. I also want to take a moment just to let folks know that in the back we have the District Attorney's Office as well as the Department of Mental Health. They have a resource table set up in the back, and I want to thank our sister department, the Department of Mental Health, for being here tonight and representing. They're in the house, and so thank you so much for being here. All right, so we're going to continue this discussion, and our next speaker is Jessica Ellis. Jessica serves as the Executive Director for the Centinela Youth Services, CYS, and the Every Child Restorative Justice Centers, the country's leading community-based front-end diversion program. This nationally recognized as an effective CYS, they provide trauma-informed restorative justice services to youth and victims of youth crime. Training local volunteers to facilitate a meeting between the responsible youth and the victim. So truly transformative justice. CYS puts the justice process back in the hands of the community while dramatically reducing recidivism and improving outcomes for youth. Working with school districts, law enforcement, and the courts, CYS facilitates policy changes so youth are referred to community-based services instead of expulsion, arrest, or detention. Welcome, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Pastor O. Before I get started, I'm going to show just a 3-minute video on what is restorative justice, and that'll kind of ground our discussion for today. Take it away, Demetrius. Thank you.
More than half of victims of violent crime don't even call the police in the first place. They prefer nothing to everything we have to offer. The vast majority of crime survivors' pain goes unhealed.
What the existence of restorative justice means is that we can no longer pretend we don't know what else to do. As a country, we're really good at punishment. It's passive, it doesn't require people to act, think, it certainly doesn't require them to change. When we lock people up, we excuse them from their responsibility to answer for what they've done. Restorative justice is a process to hold them accountable. It's a tool. People take turns answering questions like what happened, what needs arise, whose responsibility is it to meet those needs, and how is that person going to do it? It requires someone to take responsibility, to repair things as much as possible, and to never commit that harm again. This isn't about feeling sorry, it's about doing sorry. Things like go to school, get a job, pay restitution, apologize, do community service. Restorative justice practices have been used to address low-level infractions like vandalism, up to addressing the impact of murders on the surviving family members. Restorative justice processes are first and foremost about meeting the needs of people who are hurt. Sometimes the person who can make the greatest contribution to a survivor's healing is the person who harmed them. To come through trauma, we need answers to our questions. To say, my life was never the same after you hurt me like that. Crime survivors want the most safety possibly available. So if incarceration actually produced safety, we would have the safest country in human history. That's not what we have. The core drivers of violence are shame, isolation, an inability to meet one's economic needs, and exposure to violence. And we bake those into prisons to try and keep people from committing further violence. Incarceration exposes people to exactly the things that increase the likelihood that they'll go on to harm others. People who are hurt deserve a process that will help them heal. People who are responsible for crime have an obligation to be accountable for that. All of us deserve responses to crime that actually make us safer. Our current criminal justice system doesn't deliver any of those, and restorative justice at its best delivers them all.
So my name is Jessica Ellis, Executive Director at Sentinelli Youth Services, and I do this work in restorative justice because my own family was impacted by the justice system and by violent crime. I lost loved ones to violent crime. I lost loved ones to incarceration. And for me, the system it just created more pain and not healing for any of us. So I learned about restorative justice and decided I wanted to devote my career to that because there's a better way. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Our organization was started in Inglewood in 1973 and has since grown for the last 30 years. You can go to the next slide. About 30 years ago, our work was so effective that the presiding judge of juvenile court asked us to expand countywide. There was never enough funding for countywide. We've always found our own funding. So we focused our work where young people were being arrested at the highest rates with the greatest racial disparities. So we've long been in South LA, Inglewood, Compton, working to end this pipeline of our children into the justice system. And so I'll talk about what that looks like. And our work has been proven to be so effective that the county came to investigate our work and then started a process which has now turned into the Department of Youth Development, which is creating an infrastructure for more funding to fund other nonprofit agencies to come in and do more of this to ensure that the whole county is covered. And so we'll talk about that. But our agency is connected to diverting cases of kids under 18, arrests coming out of 77th Division and surrounding. So we impact this community, and so we'll talk through what that looks like. Okay, next slide. Our goal is to keep kids in school, strengthen families, and improve public safety. So we can have both. We can keep kids out of the system, and we can improve public safety. Next slide. The way we define diversion is diverting a case from the next legal step it otherwise would have taken. The reason that's important is because so many of our kids can get labeled under diversion even, when really it's just prevention. Kids make mistakes. And there's lots of other communities that let kids make mistakes and don't call the police. And there's huge disparities on who we call police about. And we've had kids arrested for spraying shaving cream on the grass. Like, I'm sorry, that does not need police involvement. And that was local to here. So we are also interrupting who's calling police the most when we get into this process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're talking about there needs to be a real verifiable crime. Otherwise, we're advocating the charges get dropped. Next slide. And we're going to look at, so we really do an equity screening of the cases that we get to make sure that things are fair. And we intervene when it's not fair. And we are serving, in this program, young people have to be under 18 at the time of the offense because we only have a license to operate within the juvenile justice system. And there's some reasons for that. And when they come to us, we're not going to force them to do anything. It's all voluntary, and we're going to work with the young person and the family. What do you need? What do you think is best for you and your family? What is going to help you get on track and meet your goals? As opposed to coming at them with a bunch of conditions that are impossible to meet. And really individualize the services. The vast majority of kids that come to us are at very low risk of recidivism. They're just being over-policed for normal teenage behavior, normal teenage risk-taking. So in the vast majority of the situations, all we do is a one-time meeting with the person that was impacted, do a restorative justice session to make things right, and once they fulfill those agreements, they're done. There's a small percentage of young people that we see that have high needs and are maybe getting involved in things that are going to continue this behavior for a while if we don't do more. So for those situations, we could do more wraparound intensive supports when it's needed. But that screening out of with an equity lens is crucial in diversion because you can over-service kids and actually create a situation where they're more likely to recidivate than they would have had they not come into your program. Because now you're giving them the message, oh, there's something wrong with you. Next slide. So we work at creating multiple off-ramps out of the system. So for the longest time, for the first 30 years of our time, what we did was essentially post-arrest. So a young person was arrested, and then they would be diverted to us by the probation department instead of going to court. So it was interrupting the court process, so they wouldn't have a conviction on their record. Or they could be later sent to us by the DA's office, either pre or post-filing. But in 2011, we worked with LAPD, starting with 77th Division in Southeast, and innovated the concept of pre-booking diversion for the first time in California. And that meant interrupting the arrest itself, because it's kind of a misconception that kids' records just get sealed. Those records can follow you. The sealing system has lots of holes in it. If you want something with security clearance down the road, we had a brilliant little girl got caught with shoplifting because she was following her friends because she was 14, and that's what you do when you're 14. You care about your friends. And then she's 21 with a degree in accounting and ready to be a CPA, and that theft is holding her back. So we want to make sure that our kids' records are completely clean so that their futures are wide open. Next slide. So we started interrupting the arrest itself. Research shows a single arrest, even if the kid never sees the inside of a courtroom, makes kids 7 times more likely to experience adult unemployment and welfare dependence, even without a conviction. So the arrest itself is harmful to kids. And so we can interrupt that. So what we did in working with LAPD was figure out how to interrupt the arrest itself. And that was so successful in further reducing rearrest rates and helping kids get back on track and really keeping their record purely clean. Because when they finish diversion, when they've come to us pre-booking from law enforcement and they complete diversion successfully, they can legally say they were not arrested. And we worked with LAPD to get that done even for nonviolent felonies. So the full range of all misdemeanors are eligible for that, and most felonies, except for the most violent. Can you skip 2 slides? Yeah, thanks. We also do training with our law enforcement partners about the teen brain. I won't get into this one now, but the top is the adult brain on impulse control. The bottom is the 12-year-old brain on impulse control. Not much lit up there. So we talk about our kids just don't have all the decision-making tools yet, and so we can't be treating them with the same tools we're responding to adults with. And so we do a lot to change the attitudes and behaviors of law enforcement that are coming in contact with our kids. And that's an important part of our work to get to, I think, was it Mr. Sam's question around how do you know that people are being diverted equitably? And so one step is through the intensive work we do with law enforcement to understand why we do this. So many of them are throughout the career, got the idea that some kids are just bad, or that being bad is a permanent character trait, or that kids come from bad families. There's just all these misconceptions that we just do not, they are just not true. The vast majority of kids we see come from very caring families that are not dysfunctional, and there's all kinds of other systemic reasons why this is happening. So we work through that. So that turns some minds, not all. And the next step then is getting the data. So we get a hold of the data of all their youth arrest data and then look at it and we compare it. We look at the demographics and then we look at our diversion, who they sent us for diversion, and we look at the local population and are we seeing equitably who's getting diverted. 2 slides, skip. Yep. So in our work, we have the young person meet with the person that they harmed through their actions to learn from that and figure out a way to make things right directly. And that meeting, we help facilitate it, but we're a neutral party. We have no say over that. Whatever the young person wants to offer up to make things right, and then whatever the harmed party agrees is fair, and we negotiate from there. In our court system, all victims have to ask for is money, really. So the madder you are, the more money you ask for. But a lot of our kids and families literally don't have the money. So one of the biggest misconceptions about our court system in California is that there's actual accountability there. We found in an external study that was done by the courts looking at our program versus the courts a few years ago, our court system was collecting $1.94 per kid in restitution. They were ordering it all the time. They would order restitution and fines and fees on top of that. They would collect their fines and fees first, or if the family couldn't pay, you'd trap a family into poverty by holding their license, driver's license. Now you can't get a good job in LA without a driver's license. So it's just like a whole system that does not work. And meanwhile, the victim gets nothing. So that's not accountability. And so in this process, if they agree on any kind of payment, it goes all to the victim. There's no fines or fees or anything for our program, no cost at all. And, but also we're building empathy between both parties. So often what will happen is the victim's emotional needs got met about what happened, why this happened, blah, blah, blah. They got an apology. So then by the time we get to negotiations, usually they're not asking for money anymore. We're getting to more meaningful things, acts of service, et cetera. So next slide. So our kids also were completing their community service at 6 times the rate than if it was court ordered. Because for the teenage brain, the court orders it, the man made me do it. They don't even connect it to the crime. But when they've met face-to-face with someone who is impacted by their actions, they go, oh, I got to do this service because I committed to Mr. Smith because I messed up his store and that's how he feeds his family. They make the connection, and so they willingly do it. Plus, we support. We don't just hand them a list of a bunch of outdated stuff where you have to pay money to do your community service. We don't work with any of those kind of court-based situations that make money off of folks that can't afford it. Next slide. So 86% of the time, our kids complete their restitution agreement in full with the crime victim. If the victim doesn't want to participate, another community member can represent how that impacts the community. And our kids, 96% of the time, rate the process as fair and equitable. So in our society, we have this misconception that you only get a good agreement if both parties are unhappy. I think they teach that in law school. But restorative justice says that no, we can get to a place where both parties are pretty content with and feel like it's fair. So that is possible when you really let it come from them. Next slide. Next, 2 more slides. So again, kids have to be under 18 at the time of the referral to come to us. Generally, not as they don't have a prior felony conviction, but there's some exceptions to that. And the crime itself would be a misdemeanor or a felony that's on the list of qualified, which I'll show you in a second. And it must be voluntary, not court-ordered. So it has to be the kid and the parent want this and are open to it. Next. It's too small. Well, maybe you can see it there. So in bold are the felony offenses that we accept, and the rest are misdemeanors. So we can serve a wide range. And this was developed over time with consensus, with community members, the court system, the DA's office, the public defender's office, civil rights attorneys, looking at, we started off with first-time offenders only, then it expanded to kids with 3rd and 4th offenses because we realized they really weren't getting the interventions or supports that they needed from being on probation. And then it extended into sexual battery offenses, et cetera. So we just kept growing it as we saw that we could still be effective and still protect public safety. Our kids are, recidivism is a new arrest, and we define that as a new arrest 1 year after completion of services to compare with recidivism rates that the court has in terms of 1 year after court supervision. We cut recidivism by 50 to 75%. It's hugely lower. So when a kid has been prosecuted in court, 2/3 typically go on to commit a new offense. So prosecuting a kid in court is not changing the behavior, but we're adding further harm to that child and really harming their future and their family's future. So we can do better. Next slide. When kids come to us, like I said, if they're low risk, the vast majority do the one-time restorative justice session. And if there's more needs, we can do individualized plans that can involve any combination of things from mentoring to supports in schools. We also work closely with civil rights attorneys because so many of our kids, especially our Black youth, are experiencing discrimination in the schools and school push-out, and particularly foster youth. And so we work very closely with civil rights attorneys as well and screen for those kinds of issues going on. Next slide. And a little bit more about equity. So we review crime reports, particularly with Black children. We see a higher rate of being sent to us for assault when really they had been bullied for a long time and tried to tell the school or somebody and nobody helped and they finally fought back. That is self-defense. So we are going to go to the mat that is self-defense and this child does not deserve diversion. Also looking at things that the child was not engaged in arrestable behavior until the adult instigated or escalated the situation. Another situation we see in schools a lot. The kid's like, having a bad day, I'm leaving school. School security guard goes, no, you can't leave school. You gotta go to the office. Grabs the kid by the arm. Kid goes, get off me, man. And then, oh, assault on a school official. Okay, let's write that up. They didn't have to put hands on that kid. So what if the kid leaves, report to the parent that they're leaving against it. This is not prison, this is school. So there's a lot of that we screen, and they'll get just put into the justice system for assault. So we're really looking at how can we hold us as adults more accountable than kids. We have to do right first by our babies. Next is over-policing of Black and brown youth. I gave you some examples of that already. We had a kid from a school district, I will not name, sent to us on an expulsion for Sexual assault. That is what they were going to put on this child's record. An expulsion record follows you forever. This was a 12-year-old who was twerking at the school dance because they played the twerking song at the dance. What do you expect children to do? You play the song, they're going to twerk. Sexual assault. We found out he was in foster care. He had a lot of trauma. He had just lost mom and then grandma, and so he was acting out. So he was a handful, and they were sick of dealing with him, and they just wanted to get rid of him. So that's common. So we have to screen for these things. And then patterns by certain schools calling police more often. Once we make a relationship with law enforcement, we can ask them, who calls you the most? And they'll tell us. And then we go over there, excuse me, so-and-so middle school, we're going to do some training on restorative practices and some alternatives to calling police. Our biggest new frontier on this is group homes. In the city of Hawthorne, tiny little town, 2 group homes call that police department 1,000 times in a year. In Carson Sheriff's Department, 2 group homes call them 60 times a month. So that's our next frontier. Next slide. Some more on equity protections that we'd love to advance to and that you can advocate for is considering blind case reviews. This has been experimented with, credit to Gascon's office. He did some of this when he was in San Francisco. So setting up blind case reviews so that whoever's deciding who's going to diversion doesn't get to know any clues as to their demographics. But there's also checks and balances of you can do it through data too and hold people accountable that way. And then less emphasis on priors in high policed areas. So a lot of diversion programs will only take first-time offenders only. Well, that doesn't work if you're in an area that's policing kids all over the place for every little thing. So you got to consider that. And then we need special protections for youth in foster care. We were finding a lot of kids in foster care weren't making it into diversion because the group home or the foster parent was denying it because they didn't want to be bothered. And so we worked out a deal with DCFS that the foster parent or the group home could not deny the child the right to diversion. So if they turn it down, we have the police send it anyway and just tell us that, and then we get the child's dependency attorney to approve it, and we move forward. And then also where places, the police were only called due to an institutional policy, that's group homes. So lots of things need to get put in place to do diversion with equity. And that's something that we're really passionate about and we train other organizations to do. And the other piece around equity that I do want to commend Gascon's office for is we've been working with the DA's office for a couple decades. But when he came in, he did make sure that pre-filing diversion was being screened at every single courthouse in the county, instead of it just being wherever we were servicing and had gotten to them yet. And so that is really important for equity. I have a couple brochures, some brochures in the back. DMH was very gracious to let me use a corner of their table. And I will be sticking around if any questions too. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. I have a question. So Jessica and I were at a listening session last week with the new DYD department, and it was brought to our attention that 80% of offenses for juveniles are divertible, but only 20% get diverted. So I didn't hear that come up in your presentation, but I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. How can we as community members advocate, because I know disproportionately Black and brown youth are being represented in those non-divertible offenses?
Yeah, I think the big frontier is starting to get the schools and the group homes to stop calling police in the first place. Because once the police are called, they get a lot of community pressure too from other parts of the community saying you need to act when we call you. So they kind of feel put in the middle on some of that. And the vast majority of what they get called for is not coming from the community. It's coming from schools, group homes, institutions. So we need to hold our other institutions accountable for how they're utilizing police. Secondly, I would say that I'm not sure I fully agree with the 80% number. Part of it, where that 80% number comes from is also including tickets. So yes, we believe in completely decriminalizing status offenses or tickets, like curfew violation, things that are only illegal because you're underage. Having cigarettes, alcohol, jumping turnstiles, like little things like that. And we've gotten to that point with most of our law enforcement partners is they just don't even issue tickets anymore. Or if they do, they send them to us. And for us, that's not even technically diversion. It's completely voluntary. The kid can do our program or not do our program. There's no report back to police. And so really when you're talking misdemeanors and felonies, I do think in some areas we've gotten to a pretty good place with that, with getting the maximum amount of kids diverted as possible, sort of. But the big next frontier for all of us is our kids and their access to guns. And so what are we doing to keep our babies safe so that they're not feeling like they need to run around with guns, because that is what is keeping them from being divertible now. So I know that I called up the the public defender at Inglewood, and she was going through her caseload. So these are what had been filed. And almost everything that she had filed, the kid had a gun. So that was a good sign for diversion. She didn't have a bunch of small offenses. She only had serious offenses at that point. So I think there's still more community work that we can do to keep our kids safe.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to our last speaker for this evening? You guys are like, no, y'all need to wrap this up soon. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you. All right. So our last speaker is Karen Allen with the Victim Service. She's a Victim Services representative with the Bureau of Victim Services in the DA's office. She's had over 23 years of service with the LA District Attorney's Office. And the Victim Services representatives, they work in coordination with the deputy DAs and are specifically trained to help children, seniors, people with disabilities, and victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, and other violent crime. So thank you so much and welcome, Karen.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Very pleased to be here and meet all of you guys. I was asked to give a bio. That means talk about myself. I found that is one of the most difficult things to do, is to speak about yourself. But here we go. I was born in Philadelphia, went to school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, spent summers in Bronx, New York with my mother. Attend Catholic school on up to college, received associate's degree, Temple University Administration of Justice, received a bachelor's degree, Cal State Long Beach Administration of Justice, received a master's degree, National University in Public Administration, received a master's in applied psychology, the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Note one thing, everybody, I purposely left out dates because females don't like to tell their age. Let me talk a little bit about my work experiences. The first important job I ever had was working at McDonald's. Once those days was over, I was lucky enough to get accepted in an elite program founded by Reverend Leon Sullivan. Please don't date that. It was designed to introduce college students to professional work. While attending Temple University, I worked in an all-men maximum security prison, Holmesburg, Pennsylvania, as a detox counselor. During that time, the drug of choice was heroin. I relocated to California and attended Cal State University, Long Beach, go 49ers, and worked as a diversion counselor for Watts Health Foundation, House of Uhuru. You guys know House of Uhuru. Woohoo! House of Uhuru is still there, still standing. The program worked directly with court-mandated individuals with drug and alcohol problems. What I learned from that journey is that throughout my work experiences, in order to enjoy a thriving community, as we all want, we must have safe streets. And programs such as mental health facilities, affordable housing, and equal opportunities for all is a start. From that, because I didn't come prepared with a PowerPoint, I'd just like to briefly let you know what we do with the Victim Witness Assistance Program. You know, it was founded in the late 70s, early 80s, something like that. And the design of it was to help victims of crime become whole as much as possible, you know, to introduce them to the criminal justice system, and mostly to let them know that their walk is not alone. There's very few of us that will not raise our hands if I ask, have you been a victim of crime, or has anyone in your family members or friends been a victim of crime? I think we all will raise our hands to that. We're here, and we're still here, and we offer a lot of services to help restore people back to some type of normalcy. We start with offering mental health. We pay medical bills, as you all know. We help people relocate, especially in cases of domestic violence, or if we feel as though their life is in jeopardy because of gang violence and things of that nature. We are in the communities, and we enjoy educating the communities and with things such as like identify what is domestic violence, so that way you know if you have been a victim and what you need to do to protect yourself. What I've noticed through my career is that there's a rise in juvenile domestic violence with their partners. They're fighting too much. And I wonder why they're attacking the girls attacking the boys, and that type of thing. So we try to get into the schools and let them know what is sexual abuse, when do you have a right to say no, when you have a right to say yes, and that type of thing. And what happens, it doesn't matter who is the perpetrator, that you have support in the Victim Witness Assistance Program. We've increased our funding lately. We went from funeral burial expenses from $7,500 to $12,818. And relocation expenses increased from $2,000 to $3,418. And I want you to know that we pay wage loss if a parent has to attend to her child as he heals or she's having to heal because of devastating, you know, crime. We will pay wage loss for up to a year with that, you know, if she can prove that she was working or he was working. We don't discriminate against the men or the women. There's an equal opportunity program. We offer help to everyone. We do not judge people or where they come from, their ethnicity or their backgrounds. It matters nothing if they live in the state of California and they have been a victim of crime, we're there to help. And that's what I enjoy doing. I don't need to talk long about this because I know you guys know what we do in the community. We only wish that we could do more, and we also wish that, you know, the crime rates would go up as opposed to rise. That's our dream, because I don't care if they phase me out. You know, I'll find other things to do. I don't have to just work as a victim advocate and see these type of things happen continuously throughout our community. I don't know why the crime rates are rising. I do know that they are. So I think that's for people with a, you know, higher pay grade or whatever to figure that out. In the meantime, I'll continue to be a victim witness advocate, and I hope all you guys have the best of life without being victimized in the state of California. Thank you for letting me share.
Okay, well, I want to thank you guys all for joining the District Attorney's African American Advisory Board. I want to thank my fellow members for helping to plan this. I want to thank Professor, I've made you a professor now, Pastor Orlando Hadnot in the Holy Tabernacle of God Church for allowing us to share this space tonight. And I want you guys all to be safe within the community. Keep being advocates because we all need you. And I want to specifically thank the District Attorney's Office for giving us a seat at the table to share our voice in the concerns of the community. Thank you and have a good night.